Okay. Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait for people to join the session before we get started. Okay. I can see that people are starting to join. So we'll just give people a chance to join before we start the session. Okay. Maybe just a few more seconds and then we get started. I can see people are still joining. Okay. This session is being recorded, so I think we should just go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Enchanted Library session. So this is the sustainability session that you're joining, and our first speaker for this track is Charles Burdett from PIPDEX. I'm not gonna take too much time away from Charles, so that he can give his full talk, for the full half an hour. So after his talk, we will have a Q&A session. So there should be a chat icon on your screen, and there's also a Q&A tab somewhere where you can type in your questions. The chat is really for everyone to chat to each other. But if you've got a question for after Charles's talk, please type it in the Q&A section. So it's easier for us to spot it and tag it as answered or not answered yet. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Charles Burdett, who is the CEO and founder of PIPDEX. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you very much, Jen. And thanks, everyone, for coming along. This is the first time I've ever given a remote talk, so it's a little disconcerting to not be able to see anyone. But to try and make this a little bit more interactive, I really encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A, not only at the end, where we can maybe have more of a discussion, but ask them during the talk, and I will answer them during the talk, because I have no slides. This is just going to be me telling you some stories about things that I've learned as the founder and CEO of PIPDEX, and how there are a lot of things I've noticed and learned the hard way that I think are really valuable to kind of impart at a conference like this. So if that's all good, I'd love are there any PIPDEX customers in this conference? Okay, we've got one, Rob. It's good to know that there's someone here that knows what PIPDEX is. So before I get going, I'll quickly explain to you what PIPDEX are. So 4 years ago, I made this deck of cards, and it's a bunch of instructions on how to run sort of design workshops to help you and your team kind of solve problems together. And I made this as a tool to help my colleagues who kept asking me, how do I run workshops? And I said, let me just put everything I know into a deck of cards, and then you can leave me alone and carry on running workshops. And this was fine for a time, but then people kept coming up to me and saying, which card should I start with? And then that's when I evolved the product so that there was a bit more of a system in it that helped you actually figure out where to start. And that got a few people off my back, but then people were running these workshops without me. And then they'd come to me and say, hey, Charles, I've just done this workshop. What should I do next? And then that's when the product evolved again. And became a this next iteration where every card kind of told you what was the next card that would be helpful for you. So it became a bit of a choose your own adventure, and it became this kind of enclosed system that in effect was my brain in a box that I could give to someone, and then they can go and actually make use of it. So it was a really kind of user-centric designed tool that I work backwards from people not having to ask me questions on how to do things. So that's the product, just for context of what PipDecks is. I'm not actually here to try and convince you to buy PipDecks or to sell you anything. I'm only here to share my story of growing the business from, I think we started in late 2019, early 2020, because that's really all I'm qualified to talk about. I've been interested in Wardley mapping in my previous career as a UX designer. And Wardley mapping is something that has stuck around in my mind ever since. And I'm not an expert in Wardley mapping, but I really want to share some interesting things that I've noticed about how Wardley maps have helped me growing the business, and how it's helped me notice things that have probably saved the business from complete annihilation. So one of the most unexpected things that for me with Wardley mapping is that I don't tend to do many maps. Hi, Stefan, thank you for joining. By the way, just any latecomers, this is a pretty chill talk. I don't have slides. I'm just going to talk through some stuff, ask questions throughout. I'll be happy to answer them as we go. So with Wardley mapping, how I approach Wardley mapping is if I really need to work something out, or I need to get a concept or the situation of things across to someone else, maps really help. But I found mapping to be something that comes a little bit more intuitively in as a way of thinking. And what I mean by that, and maybe you can call this Wardley thinking rather than Wardley mapping, is I'm always thinking about, you know, what does this thing depend on, and how evolved is that thing, and how risky is it that it's in that stage of evolution? And this is just a general kind of thought pattern that kind of runs through my operating system in my mind that has made Wardley mapping a bit more of a kind of natural, intuitive way of operating rather than something you go and do with people. So I just thought that was an interesting kind of way of demonstrating that Wardley mapping doesn't have to be this really kind of intense, detailed thing, because, you know, you Google Wardley maps and you get these great big complicated diagrams that, you know, if you weren't there mapping it, they're kind of a bit of a mystery to you. And yeah, anyway. So what I want to talk to you today about is the journey of PipDecks. And the title of this talk is about how stress is a good thing in business. And the reason why is that all of the mistakes and failures and near-death experiences that my business has had have been entirely necessary to be where I am now. And avoiding them would have meant probably certain death. And so this brings me on to the concept of anti-fragile. And I don't know if anyone in the chat, if you want to say, if you're familiar with the phrase or the concept of anti-fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, but anti-fragile is a extraordinarily helpful, again, kind of operating system to think about when you're working with in a business, on a business, inside a business, or outside of one, from a consulting point of view, literally any angle that you're involved in business. Anti-fragility is massive, and Wardley maps are very helpful at identifying fragility or anti-fragility. So a quick kind of most of us will plots. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading some of those messages coming through the VFAS system. You've only just joined. Okay, 15 of you just joined. I'll do a quick recap. I'm Charles Burdett, CEO and founder of PipDecks. I've briefly explained what PipDecks are decks of cards that help you do stuff. And I've quickly talked about how I do a lot more Wardley thinking than Wardley mapping, so thinking in maps rather than actually mapping itself. And I'm talking today about how stress can or is an essential thing to building a business, and that this stress is actually something that forms around the concept of anti-fragility, which is something that Wardley maps can help you detect. I hope that's okay. So for the concept of anti-fragile, so the question Taleb poses in his book very early on, in his book Anti-Fragile, is he asks what is the opposite of fragile? And most people will answer robust or resilient. Now, fragile is something that crumbles under pressure or breaks under stress, like dropping a wine glass on a concrete floor. The opposite of fragile is anti-fragile, which means something that gains and becomes better or is improved by stress. And you can imagine things such as tearing muscle fibers from lifting kettlebells, and then your body recognizing that your muscles have been overexerted, therefore it must not only repair them, but make them a little bit stronger, so that just in case that they have to perform that same strain again, they'll be able to weather that strain. And this concept of anti-fragility is the crux of what has, I think, enabled me to not lose my shirt whilst growing a business, because the concept of anti-fragility is something that has been massively beneficial in going through the stress and understanding that it's a good thing. So I want to give you some actual real world stories of basically all the fuck ups that I've made growing Pipdeck over the last 4 years, and how that we wouldn't be here if we hadn't made those fuck ups. And that this embracing discomfort and mistakes is kind of the only way to make progress. And actually very early on, naivety is the greatest superpower you have. So when Pipdeck first started out, it was a fairly quiet affair. It was a small side project of mine. I didn't really have any great ambitions for it. And experimenting with Facebook and Instagram ads, quickly discovered that for every, I don't know, $10 that I put into the Facebook black box, we got $100 out. And this was like a rat finding a bottle of cocaine water. And you can now imagine sort of the next 6 to 18 months where you just see how far that can go. You keep dialing up that ad spend. And because you're a brand new business and cash flow is a thing, and because you have no one else on your team and it's just you, you're kind of going into this in an uncharted territory. So if you imagine this is me on a little sailboat going out into sea, quite happy that I'm actually on a boat and quite happy that I've actually caught some wind and we're now moving. And then we're getting faster and faster. And then before you know it, I've sold out of stock, but I can't slow the thing down because there's money coming in and I need to be able to keep the business making money. And so it got to a point where we were selling decks on back order, on pre-order, whilst ordering new stock, whilst receiving new orders. And this was amassing to a point where we had tens of thousands of customers who would purchase something, and months had gone by and they hadn't received anything. And this was, honestly, you even think about it now, like makes me feel sick with how much stress I was going through. And you might say, why don't you just turn it off? But it's like, when you're in that moment and you're making the business is being that successful and making that much money, it's a really tough thing because you don't want to stifle this growth that you found. So the only way that I would have developed the risk tolerance to be spending tens to hundreds of thousands of pounds on manufacturing, tens of thousands of more pip decks was only by the virtue that I naively scaled the thing and basically punched myself in the face by going out of stock. So that was kind of major mistake number one that led to kind of major development with the business, which was discovering that we had this huge demand for this product, discovering that to actually meet that demand, we needed to buy a lot of stock to kind of grow. And the only way to have done that was to go through this painful journey of going out of stock, only accepting pre-orders, dealing with, all of the fallout of that was we obviously got bad reviews from people saying, I ordered this months ago and it's still not arrived. When you're receiving money, payment processing via PayPal, if PayPal is detecting that those orders aren't being fulfilled, they will freeze your account. So PayPal froze hundreds of thousands of pounds of money. Similarly with Facebook ads, Facebook will go and randomly survey people who they know have purchased a product through one of your ads and ask them questions like, did the product arrive on time? And obviously, because it's a pre-order at that point or a back order, they'll say no. And this reduces your Facebook audience score, which is like this internal metric they use to kind of determine how how good of a deal you'll get on your advertising metrics. And this caused our advertising to become more expensive. So all of these second and third order effects that happened as a result of making this decision to keep selling whilst out of stock was horrific. But again, all of the kind of holes in the hull of the ship that occurred because of that, we shored them up even stronger. And stock came in. We ordered way more stock than we thought we needed, which in hindsight was a good thing because this didn't stop growing. So yeah, that was kind of mistake number one that led to actually building a more robust business, which now could weather more sales spikes, more growth, and more everything. And so that's mistake number one. Another mistake I've made that you kind of have to make, I think, as a new business owner is hiring mistakes. There came a point in PipDex's time when I decided, right, we're going to now create a B2B sales function, and we're going to go and approach businesses and sell large quantities of decks, either for as a supplement to their training or as onboarding gifts and that kind of thing. And I knew someone, and their job title was commercial director. And I thought, well, they've dealt with B2B sales, I'll hire them. And from my point of view, they were an adult and I was a kid. And they're going to come in and just help me grow this arm of PipDex that was going to be, leading B2B sales. And so I hired the guy, and obviously didn't do any due diligence on his experience. I kind of just went off vibes, and I went off of his job title and his kind of adjacent experience. And I had to let him go within the first 4 weeks. And that was such a hard thing to do when someone's left their job to come and join you, and then 2 or 3 weeks in, you realize you've made a terrible mistake and that there's no way out of this other than telling them that you've made a mistake and you've got to let them go. And this stress, not only to me personally, but to the business where we've spent all this time hiring the wrong person, again, another hole in the ship that is patched up and made even stronger, where now hiring is far more due diligent, references are gotten, there's a much more thorough interview process. And, someone could have told me that beforehand, like, go through this process. And I'd be like, nah, it's fine. Like, I know a good person when I see one, but I had to kind of step on that rake to learn it. And again, this is just being able to be weathering this kind of mistake and knowing, because at the time I wasn't really thinking, oh, it's a good thing I made this mistake. It's only in hindsight that I am now who I am because of accepting these mistakes. And kind of laying the anti-fragile lens over everything has made me realize, like, right, this had to happen to be where I am now. The next mistake we made, not necessarily a mistake, but kind of, no, it is a mistake, is I think in the last 4 years, we've been through like 4 different accountants. And I've learned that I've become terrible at actually picking a good accountant. You know, you start from the first accountant, which is like a high street accountant that has no idea about e-commerce. And you realize, okay, I need someone who knows what they're talking about. And then a quick Google and a few kind of phone calls, and you're now with another accountant who's reassuring you that everything's going to be fine, and that they're going to solve all your problems. But their communication is a bit terrible. They're kind of slow to reply, and then you discover they, you know, forgot to file your VAT return, and you're like, what is going on? So you fire them and get another one who says they're an e-commerce specialist, and you believe them because their website says it all. And, you know, accountants are chartered and they have to do one job right, which is to get the numbers right. But apparently that still doesn't mean that all accountants do that. So I think our third accountant, you know, wasn't reconciling our stock in all the warehouses that we had, and so our balance sheet was just all wrong. And so at this point, I'm thinking, right, I need to get someone who knows what they're talking about. I need a chief financial officer. So I hired a part-time chief financial officer to just to help me like figure out what the hell is going on, because I've never done anything like this before. I've never started a business. I've never had to hire an accountant. I don't know what a good one actually looks like, apparently. And she was like, look, you need a top 10 firm, like the size that you're getting and the speed you're going and the complexity that you've arrived at so quickly. You need a top 10 firm with a team that, you know, has a VAT department, has a whatever, you know, all these different departments. I'm like, okay. And again, like, wouldn't have arrived here if I wasn't just making the mistake constantly of being a bad accountant picker. And I guess the lesson there is always go and consult with someone who knows far more about the thing that you're trying to do. And so those are kind of like general teething mistakes of starting a business. The biggest mistake that we've made, and is kind of where we're at now in the story, is, and again, this kind of lends into anti-fragility, is that we've actually built in a huge fragility into the business, and we've only kind of just woken up from it. And that fragility is an over-optimization of a single point of failure. And now on a Wardley map, they can be quite obvious, but also maybe because they're over on the commodity kind of evolution sector, you might think they're, you know, not prone to failure. But that isn't true. We have power cuts. These sorts of things happen. So the biggest mistake we made is, I mentioned the cocaine water bottle that the rat discovered, which is me finding Facebook ads quite early on with pip decks. You know, when you find something that you put money in and you get more money out and it scales, and you don't have to kind of think too hard other than, you know, managing all the metrics that kind of come with Facebook ads. This is when, over the last 3 years, pretty much the entirety of my business has been optimized for Facebook ad sales. And what this looks like is that the marketing team is really a Facebook ads team. The website and the design of it and the offer and everything is designed for capturing a bottom of funnel sale from traffic from Facebook. Even the price, I know someone's mentioned the price, like even the price is something that, and the offer is designed to get as high average order value as possible from a customer from Facebook. And the costs of Facebook are going up. And that means we need to maintain this. And it gets harder. There's diminishing returns as you scale up into 8 figures. And so what's happened here is we've over optimized Facebook, and not just from a sort of a marketing point of view, but the whole business has now been over optimized for Facebook. You know, I'm sponsoring this conference, but like that's probably the only sort of non-Facebook marketing thing we've done all year. And I'm only sponsoring it because I have a fascination with Wardley mapping, and Ben Mosier, who's the author of Strategy Tactics, is giving a talk later today as well. And so yeah, this over optimization, and Taleb warns against this, which it does lead to fragility, and now the business is fragile as a result. And when you over optimize something, you're typically making it efficient for a specific set of conditions. And those conditions are that someone has enough spending power and happens to be on Facebook, and you know, all these things that means that we only get this particular kind of sale, whilst the economy and whilst the Facebook algorithm is all in a status quo. And what this means is that the system that we've created at PipDex means it's now vulnerable to unexpected changes, or as Taleb calls them, black swan events, that can have massive impacts. And you know, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, or invasion, sorry, as it ought to be called, the Suez Canal being blocked, COVID, like some people argue COVID isn't a black swan because there's a pandemic every X number of years on average. But again, the history is just one damn thing after another. And if you're over optimizing for like a very specific set of conditions, this creates fragility in the business. So when conditions shift, which they are, like that tomorrow, one of our ad team members might put an ad into the system that might happen to trigger something in the Facebook algorithm that might determine that we've violated Facebook's policy for ads, and they might ban our account. It happens, and it hasn't happened to us, luckily, but it does happen. And that would literally switch off our main revenue stream. And that's the position we've kind of optimized ourselves into. So we've kind of gone down this cul-de-sac, set up shop, and then not bothered to go out and like be inefficient and go and look at different things that we maybe can't measure the impact of. So what we're actually doing now is, before this kind of fatal blow occurs, such as a Facebook ad account being banned, or the costs just rise so much that our Facebook model just becomes unprofitable, we are self-administering a kind of shock to the system where we've just turned off Facebook ads, or at the very least dialed it down from, I think I don't know, spending $1 million a month down to 10 grand a month or something. And so what this is doing is that this self-enforced kind of shock to the system is now waking everyone up, being like, right, no revenue's coming in, what else can we now do? And everyone is now kind of like a bee in a swarming hive, going off and just finding out like where are better locations, and coming back and saying, hey, we should go, maybe we should go over here. And so this kind of ties back to what I said earlier about Wardley thinking, which is that, I mean, as much as you might map things, and as much as you might think in Wardley maps, as I'm kind of alluding to, I guess the story I'm telling here is that you can still become blinded by over optimizing something, or being so kind of incessant on trying to move that kind of Genesis or custom thing over to commodity. And for us, that was, you know, Facebook ads was the thing generating money, and it was over in Genesis and custom, like we're quite slow and quite inefficient with it. So we put all our energy into moving that Facebook ad capability, and, you know, all the things that come with it, like, you know, post-purchase email marketing, evolving all of that, but then not exploring any new things in Genesis that still connect to that same need of diversifying, you know, how we acquire revenue. And so, to be frank, like, it's terrifying. And I'm being very candid here, and I realize this is being recorded and maybe put public. which I don't know how I feel about that necessarily, but I think it's such a timely thing happening to us that I think is so interesting to objectively look at, that I thought a conference like this would find it interesting. So I hope that has been interesting. I think the risky thing I've learned is to be risk adverse. We've really avoided doing anything outside of Facebook ads because it's really hard to measure, and we're really scared. Well, we've been really scared of things that we can't measure. Like, I will not know what the ROI is on sponsoring this event. But the thing is about big companies, I mean, even look at Coca-Cola, like there's a point where just mass marketing, you either you know if it's turned on or you know if it's turned off. And so we're really looking at now encouraging more shocks to the system, being more risk hungry, inviting more good stress. And this is the thing, stress is, I think, a contraction of two types of stress. There's eustress and de-stress. Eustress is stress that improves you, de-stress is stress that hurts you. And so the whole idea is that we don't invite so much stress that kills us in one blow, but just enough that makes us stronger. And the best analogy Taleb gives for that is, it's better to be pounded by, 1,000 pebbles rather than the same quantity of pebbles as one giant boulder that would just crush you. Because those tiny pebbles over time will build calluses, and that one lethal boulder will not give you time to develop calluses. So yeah, I hope that was interesting, and I'm happy to kind of take questions and talk a bit more about this candidly. But yeah, the main insight here is that there is no shortcut to getting anywhere good other than experiencing the pain of having to get there.
Okay, Charles, thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries.
So yeah, we have some questions on the chat. So first one I am seeing here is, do you have a product strategy map? And this is from Rob. Do you have a product strategy map to improve your anti-fragility?
Product strategy map. Yes. So, I mean, the thing is, all of the maps that we ever make are so, I mean, from our point of view, they don't become artifacts that have gospel to them. They're more things that help us think through things and have a conversation around our strategy. And everything I've just spoken to you is the result of actually stepping back and looking at a map objectively, because you can still have subjective opinions of a map. And if everyone's kind of in the same mode of thinking, you can easily ignore like glaring blind spots on maps, even though it's like right in front of you. It does take someone else to come and say, hey, do you not think it's a risk that, all of our revenues coming from Facebook? And then the whole room says, yeah, but if we turn it off, the business dies. And then that person has to say, okay, but if someone else turned it off, the business would die anyway. So do you know what I mean? So it's product strategy map there isn't one single kind of document looking at and being like, this is our strategy. Honestly, having now grown a business to this size, I'm realizing that strategy is far more emergent than it is intentional, in the sense that it's kind of like a flowing river, and you're on this river, and the strategy is kind of evolving and shaping as you go. And you can map things, but if you map it again a week later, there's new information that makes that map literally useless. So in terms of like an actual map of a strategy that we're following, strategy for me are the constant conversations I'm having with everyone in the team. And I think a decision log tracking that is like the evidence of the strategy actually evolving. I hope that helped answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. There's a follow-up post from Rob as well. So your candid thinking is refreshing. Thank you for this. This also gives me a better perspective as a customer. Do you think that distress could be reduced through mapping multiple futures?
Yeah, I think I don't know, if anything I've learned is that whatever you predict might happen will not happen, or it will happen in a way that you don't expect. So really the most reliable thing we can rely on is there are books like How Brands Grow, for example, that show you data, like good data, scientific data from brands growing from different sectors, different products, different services, different countries and different decades and different time horizons, and presents all these things in a manner that shows how there are particular laws that apply across all of these brands that you cannot escape, and that you aren't unique, and that you aren't necessarily doing anything that could escape these kind of almost like laws of thermodynamics, like you just can't escape them. For example, the bigger your market share, the more loyal customers you have. Like there's just a direct correlation. And even if a small brand had a really good loyalty scheme, you can't outpace the size of a brand that just has more customers and has more loyalty. So to kind of get back to your question, like, I think we got in this position now because we tried to reduce the amount of stress on the business by avoiding doing uncomfortable things like actually confronting the issue that all of our revenues coming from Facebook. It's only been through some quite big changes at Piptex where we're like, right, we either do it ourselves now or it happens to us later. And I think the multiple futures kind of idea is, I don't know, it doesn't really appeal to me because I'm so kind of, what's the immediate next step? I mean, Simon's talk kind of embodies that, which is where his keynote from a long while ago now, cross the river by feeling the stones. I don't know what the fourth or fifth step's going to feel like, and I can't waste time actually pretending to know. So there is kind of quite an immediate kind of stepping through, but using quite universal laws that kind of are guiding us forward, such as, to grow the brand is quite simple. We need to be more available in more places, and we need to be more easily purchasable. And that means like, entering new markets or making new products or making the price more affordable, rather than trying to eke out another conversion percentage point on Facebook, So it's these bigger kind of things that we're doing. Yeah, I don't know if that helped answer the question or not, but there it is.
Okay, we've got a few more questions here. Let me just go to the Q&A tab. So the first one is this: would be interesting to look at your business through business model canvas. Anything you've done?
I mean, very early on, but again, honestly, the business evolves so rapidly that an earnest business model canvas, and yeah, these documents become far less useful when you're kind of in the trenches every day and you're actually just dealing with stuff. Doing actual like deep dive strategy work doesn't happen as thoroughly as, or in my case anyway, where you're keeping your business model canvas up to date. Like, it just doesn't happen because things are changing so much. I mean, I did do a lot of that thinking early on. I used stuff like Blue Ocean Strategy to kind of figure out like what the products and how it was going to sit versus other things out there. And that kind of sets you on a trajectory, but that evolves, So yeah, I find these frameworks to be useful to think about stuff, but for actual practical day-to-day decisions, they don't come into it.
Okay. Thanks. The next question I can see here is this: stock control and meeting expectations. Learning that through objective interviewing is essential for key roles. Seeking established expertise, example, accountants, in a way that fits with your business context. Could this be classed as doctrine that enables a new business to grow effectively? You could, yeah, go ahead.
Massively, yeah. I think the doctrine and how we actually approach things and the basic discipline we have is, again, like, I don't think any aspect of broadly map strategy is immune to the concept of anti-fragility. Like, we had to have poor doctrine in order to kind of improve our doctrine. And I think there could absolutely be way more proactive work on my part to be more aware of that up front. But I guess the moral of the story I've told you is that, someone could tell you, oh, you should do that. And you can hand wave it and be like, no, I'm going to do it this way. And then you make the mistake and learn, sometimes is the only way to actually cement that learning in your brain,
Okay, I don't think there's any more. I think the other question's been answered. Okay, there's one. It sounds like the doctrine was be okay doing something you know nothing about and or are actually bad at. Nice to have the luck to succeed with that and the resources to attempt it. How replicable do you think your experience was?
I love this question about, could this be done again? I think the answer is maybe no, maybe yes. Honestly, there's no kind of absolute answer here. I think at the time that the business launched and who I was when it did, are different to where we are now in the world and who I am now. I think I said in my talk just now, like, naivety was my superpower, like, and then just having a naturally sort of above average risk tolerance to not knowing stuff, I think is what allowed me to make the mistakes that kind of got me here. Maybe now I'm probably not as geared up actually to do a startup experience again, because maybe I'm too risk adverse now based on other factors. I don't know, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of luck in the sense of there's too much serendipity involved and chaos in the world to say that there was no luck involved. But at the same time, we kind of leaned into things as they, we leaned into the luck. Like the fact that Facebook ads worked really well for us was like, well, let's, not ignore that. Let's go into that. Like, it would have been stupid to have been like, hey, this is making us loads of money. Let's not do that. Do you know what I mean? So you kind of have to go through with it. But like, Facebook is so expensive now compared to then that you have to have really good margins to even scale a D2C brand now on Facebook that you couldn't have done. And I actually started advertising on Facebook after the golden era had ended, which was like 2016 to 2019, where Facebook was so cheap and so many D2C brands. There was a whole D2C bubble of like, big roll-ups by Thrasio and, e-commerce brands selling for like 12 times multiples, and they're all gone now. And there's only, that's all done. That was a bubble that pops, and that whole zero interest era and everything didn't, they weren't immune to that.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. We've got like 2 minutes. I'm not sure if there's any more questions. Maybe we can take this one as the last question. Again, this is being recorded, so we're going to be sharing the recording afterwards. So the last question I think we can tackle is this one. It sounds like the doctrine was be okay to, oh no, I think we've answered this one. Sorry, I just didn't press the answer. Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. There's some comments in the chat as well from Dave and Stefan, which you might want to look at. Charles.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I've been reading those. Appreciate Dave.
Okay.
It's definitely very interesting.
Perfect. All right. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Charles for that talk. It's been quite interesting. And I have experience with, putting ads on Facebook as well. It can really cost a lot without bringing in a lot of returns. But anyway, thanks again for joining. And we'll see you at the next sessions. The next sessions will start at 10 o'clock. So if you want to choose, which session you want to join next, whether it's the sustainability track, which is the in the Enchanted Library Room, or the recovery and resilience in the Crystal Cavern Room. As we'll see you at the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.